Week 1 is almost in the books. We just have the Vikings and the Bears on Monday Night Football tonight, and now we have to look forward towards week number 2. Who are the players that you are going to be able to pick up off the waiver wire that are going to help your team win? In today's video, we're going to be breaking down 10 plus players that I want you guys to not just run to the waiver wire to pick up. It is important to note, though, that it is just week number 1. You don't want to completely overreact to what happened in week number 1, and you don't want to go out there and unload the clip on a bunch of players off the waiver wire. Don't overspend your fab after week number 1. It is a problem that people have year after year. If you do end up enjoying today's video, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below if you're new. So without further ado, let's get into 10 plus waiver wire ads that you must add in 2025 fantasy football for week number 2. We begin with Keenan Allen, wide receiver of the Los Angeles Superchargers, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders this week in Viva Las Vegas. Keenan Allen currently rostered in 60% of leagues on Sleeper, 75.6% on ESPN, and 50% on Yahoo. The first two players we're going to break down in today's video are not going to be available in a majority of leagues, but after that, they're going to be players that are much more readily available. So Keenan Allen, if you're in an 8 or a 10-team league, may be available, and you definitely want to pick him up in week 1 up against the Kansas City Chiefs in Brazil. He was the wide receiver 10 in PPR, the wide receiver 9 in half PPR. Now, all of these stats are prior to Monday Night Football because I am recording this video before Monday Night Football, and I can't just rub a crystal ball like That's So Raven and see the future. 7 receptions on 10 targets for 68 yards and a touchdown, turning back the clock to his good old days with the Chargers in terms of snap counts. For the wide receivers in LA with the Chargers, 85% for Ladd, 82% for Quentin Johnston, 62% for Keenan Allen, 22% for KLS, and 15% or under with Davis as well as Trey Harris. Keenan Allen led the team in targets with 10, followed by Ladd with 9, and Quentin Johnston with 7. Keenan Allen also had the most receptions, third most receiving yards, and a touchdown in that game. Keenan Allen was very up and down last season. He had some very high highs, some great, phenomenal performances with the Chicago Bears last year, and then he had a bunch of other games where if you started him, he legitimately didn't do jack shit. I think he's going to be a lot more consistent this year with the Chargers, so I feel very good about picking him up if he is available. Definitely not the most safe player week in and week out, because I still do believe that Ladd McConkey is the number 1 receiver on this team, but I am definitely excited to have Keenan Allen on my team. Next up, we move to Justin Fields, quarterback of the New York Jumbo Jets, going up against the No One Circles the Wagons like the Buffalo Bills this week. 59% roster on Sleeper, 70.3% on ESPN, and 81% on Yahoo. Again, if you are playing in a smaller league, an 8 or a 10-team league, you may be able to scoop up Justin Fields. Now, Justin Fields is a player just like Keenan Allen that we talked about all summer long. We talked about these guys as players you want to be targeting in your fantasy drafts, and spoiler alert, they played amazingly in week 1. Justin Fields currently the quarterback number 2, going up against the Steelers last week, 16 of 22 passing for 218 yards and a touchdown, as well as 12 rushes for 48 yards and 2 touchdowns, 3 total touchdowns on the day for Justin Fields, up against a very solid Steelers defense. Now, the Buffalo Bills defense is solid as well, and I'm not going to necessarily say that Justin Fields is a must-start quarterback this week up against the Bills defense. I get the Bills ended up getting filleted by the Baltimore Ravens in that game. Obviously, they still win. They make the miraculous comeback, but the defense didn't excel in that game. I still think Justin Fields definitely is a start-worthy quarterback this week, just not like a clear top 5 must-start guy. Now moving into the players that are going to be much more readily available, beginning with Hollywood, Marquise Brown, wide receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs, going up against the Eagles at home in KC, the Super Bowl rematch. 31% rostered on Sleeper, 50% on ESPN, and 25% over on Yahoo. Now, this is a report from Jeff Mueller, mentioned on my YouTube video on Xavier Worthy. Once you go the surgery route, there's no going back. The Chiefs lose nothing if they give him a few weeks in rehab to see if this shoulder gains enough stability to return with a brace. If it doesn't work, he'll get surgery in a few weeks. head coach Andy Reid on Xavier Worthy's shoulder injury. I know Xavier is the big question. He's rehabbing and working his shoulder. We'll just see where it goes day to day from here. We'll see where we end up. Basically saying that they're going to monitor the situation and we will know sooner rather than later, basically. So with this scenario, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sin, so I'm not going to come on here and say Xavier Worthy's out for the season. He's going to miss multiple games. They're throwing him on IR. What the exact plan is here, because frankly, I don't know. Andy Reid didn't tell us enough. But based on what Jeff Mueller said, what they probably will do is not elect for surgery, kind of punt that down the line, and then see how things go over the next couple of weeks. So if Xavier Worthy misses multiple games, which would be the expectation, then Hollywood Brown would suit up as the wide receiver 1 on the team. I understand that Hollywood Brown isn't all that great. And frankly, if you think that he is this amazing wide receiver at this point in his career, I would strongly disagree with you. But being the wide receiver 1 on a Patrick Mahomes offense until Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy return is going to be bountiful for fantasy football. Last week up against the Chargers in Brazil, wide receiver 9 in PPR and wide receiver 14 in half PPR points per game. He had 10 receptions on 16 targets for 99 yards. In terms of the snap counts for the wide receivers on the Chiefs, 94% for Hollywood, 80% for Mr. Corvette Juju Smith-Schuster, 72% for Tyquan Thornton, 10% for Jason Brownlee, and 5% for Xavier Worthy. In that game, he clearly led the team in targets. He had 16. The next highest target earner on the team was Juju, who had 5. He had 10 receptions. The next highest guy was 5. He had 99 receiving yards. The next highest guy was 55, all being Juju Smith-Schuster. So again, whether you're a Hollywood truther or not, I don't think there's very many Hollywood Brown truthers out there at this point in his career. He clearly is the alpha wide receiver on this team when there are injuries around him or with the suspension of Rashee Rice. So even if you don't love him, this is a situation where you want to have him on your team. Don't love him this week up against the Eagles, but he is certainly start worthy, especially if you're down bad because you maybe had Xavier Worthy on your team. At number 4, we got Dylan Sampson, running back of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. 52% rostered on Sleeper, 32.7% on ESPN, and 46% on Yahoo. We talked about Dylan Sampson in last week's video, and Dylan Sampson was the better running back between Jerome Ford and Dylan Sampson. Week 1 versus the Cincinnati Bengals, RB9 in PPR, RB15 in half PPR. 12 carries for 29 yards, 2.42 yards per carry, but he made up for that with an immense amount of receiving volume. He was the trustworthy dump-off point for Cool Joe Flacco. 8 receptions on 8 targets for 64 yards like the Nintendo. He played in 43% of the snaps versus Jerome Ford's 54%. But it was very clear based on the play on the field that Dylan Sampson is levels above Jerome Ford. Now, Quentin Johnston is going to throw a giant wrench into things. The belief is that he will play in week number 2 up against the Baltimore Ravens. How involved will he be with him not being in training camp? We shall see. There is still also the potential looming suspension of Quentin Johnston. So there's a lot of scenarios going around Dylan Sampson, so I wouldn't just blow my fab load, metaphorically of course, onto Dylan Sampson. But if you don't love your running back core, Dylan Sampson is certainly worthy of an ad to be a guy that chills on your bench, because maybe now he has earned much more respect on this team. He has earned a role on this offense, and it may take a while for Quentin Johnston to actually be reinvigorated into this offense with such little time spent with the team. Next up, we keep it in Cleveland with Cedric Tillman, wide receiver of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore. 34% rostered on Sleeper, 42.6% on ESPN, and 28% over on Yahoo. Now, week number 1, up against the Cincinnati Bengals, things went swimmingly for Cedric Tillman, wide receiver 18 in PPR, wide receiver 16 in half PPR, 5 receptions on 8 targets for 52 yards and a touchdown. Judy played 88% of the snaps. Same was the case with Cedric Tillman. Jamari Thrash, 28%. Isaiah Bond, James Bond played 28% of the snaps, 007 himself. Now, you might be thinking, Nick, Why the hell did Jeudy play 88% and Cedric Tillman played 88% and no one else was even relatively close to that? It's because they were rocking with a lot of double tight end set with David Njoku as well as Harold Fannin, who we are going to be talking about a little bit later. Spoiler alert. Now, when it comes to Cedric Tillman, this was a guy that I was talking up in the offseason because Cedric Tillman had that 3-game stretch of last season where he looked like the clear best wide receiver on the Browns. Even when Jeudy was playing at his best last season, nothing was able to top what Tillman did there. Now, we have fallen for the trap. We have been the mouse looking for the cheese, and then our head gets cut off looking for it with players that have a solid 3-game sample size. Cough, cough, Zamir White. Cough, cough, Kenyon Drake. We have fallen for these traps before, but I said Cedric Tillman's trap is in round like 14, whereas those other guys were going much earlier on. So I said, you know what? Draft him with a late round pick. So some of you guys might already have him. Cedric Tillman did, in my opinion, pass the eye test better than Jerry Jeudy did. He had the same amount of targets as Jeudy, only out-targeted on the team by Harold Fannin, and he scored the lone touchdown in that game for the receivers. So I feel very good about Cedric Tillman. I don't know how great you are going to feel weekly starting him because of the quarterback situation in Cleveland, but he's definitely worth a spot on your bench and could prove to be an excellent bye-week fill-in or an excellent spot start in great matchups. The Baltimore Ravens, I get they just got face-fucked by Josh Allen, but ultimately I don't think the Cleveland Browns will be able to do the same thing to that defense. Next up, we got Kayshon Boutte, wide receiver of the New England Patriots, going up against the Miami Dolphins in the 305 Dale this week. 4% roster on Sleeper, 0.5% on ESPN, and 1% on Yahoo. Wide receiver 17 in PPR, wide receiver 18 in half PPR last week up against the Las Vegas Raiders at home in Foxborough. 6 receptions on 8 targets for 103 yards. Snap share for the Patriots wide receivers, Boutte led with 82%. The Mario time, 63%. Mac Hollins, 56%. Stephon Diggs getting eased in using the just the tip approach, 41% of the snaps. And Kyle Williams, 10%. Boutte led the team in targets, tied with Hunter Henry. Receptions, tied with Travion Henderson and Diggs. And he led in yards. The sole receiving touchdown for the team went to Demario Douglas on his 2 receptions on 7 targets. Over Kayshon Boutte's last 4 games, 5 for 95 and a tug on 7 targets, 4 for 28 on 5 targets, 7 for 117 and a touchdown on 7 targets, and 6 receptions for 103 yards on 8 targets with no touchdowns. Very clear that Drake May and Kayshon Boutte have a connection on this team. It's very clear that Drake May trusts Kayshon Boutte. I understand that Kayshon Boutte is not going to be the wide receiver 1 on this team when the season comes to a close, because that spot is reserved for Stephon Diggs, but I think he could easily be the wide receiver 2. And if this Patriots offense becomes what the Patriots offense could be based upon the skill set of the players they have on this team, then Kayshon Boutte could be an absolute steal that you look back on later on in the season like, wow, I can't believe I was able to pick up Kayshon Boutte for so cheap after the week 1 games. Next up, we move to Quentin Johnston, wide receiver of the LA Chargers, going up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas. 9% roster on Sleeper, 3.6% on ESPN, and 9% on Yahoo. But before we talk about Quentin Johnston and the rest of the players in today's video, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog and sign up using promo code Notorious or by clicking on the link in the video description, you receive a free pick plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 on a pick'em, you will receive $50 in bonus funds instantly. Make sure you sign up using promo code Notorious. If you want to understand how the pick'em works, it is very simple. You pick at least 2 players, not on the same team, and you pick the higher or the lower. If both of your picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks after 2, then the payout will be increased. Make sure you guys check that out, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now, you might be thinking, Nick, Quentin Johnston, 9% roster on Sleeper, 3.6 on ESPN, 9% on Yahoo. He just went nuclear. He's the best wide receiver on the Chargers. Back that take up. We have seen Quentin Johnston do this before. What I mean by that is we have seen him have that big game and then go silent like the night when Santa Claus shows up to your house. Last year, week 2, up against the Carolina Panthers. In PPR, he scores 22.1 fantasy points. The next week, he scores 12, then 2 points, then 5 fantasy points. And then week 9 up against the Browns, hallelujah, 22 fantasy points. And after that, he scores 10 points, 12 points, 0 points, 3 points, right? This is a disappearing act type of player that will cause you to blow your fab on him and then completely disappear on you when you need him the most. So while I think maybe this is a brand new Chargers offense, a pass-heavy attack, which I don't think will be the case, I think a lot of people are going to be pissed that they spent all of their fab. They wasted their number one priority on Quentin Johnston. And if you could get him on the cheap, go right ahead and pick him up, because this could be and should be a great offense based upon what we saw in week 1. But I think it's very important in week 1 to not just use all your fab. And not just spend, because a lot of times week 1 is a liar. Wide receiver 3 in PPR, 2.5 PPR, 5 receptions, 7 targets for 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. Again, he was the number 2 wide receiver in terms of snap share. 20% more of the snaps went to QJ compared to Keenan Allen, but I just trust Keenan Allen so much more. Next up, we got Juwan Johnson, tight end of the New Orleans Saints, going up against the 49ers at home. 5% rostered on Sleeper, 1.2% on ESPN, and 2% on Yahoo. The way Juwan Johnson flashed in this game, you would have thought it was Mardi Gras and the dude had a million beads on him. Week 1 versus the Arizona Cardinals, tight end 1 in PPR, tight end 4 in half PPR, 8 receptions on 11 targets. 11 targets for 76 yards. Tight end snap share, Juwan Johnson, 99% of snaps. Jack Stoll, 24% of snaps. He had, in this game, the second most targets behind Olave. He had the most receptions and the most receiving yards on the team. I get playing anyone on the Saints with Spencer Rattler under center might send shivers down your spine. It feels wrong. It feels disgusting. I get it. And this could just be a one-game Fugazi run out of Juwan Johnson, but he's definitely worthy of a waiver wire ad if he is going to be that safety blanket for Mr. Spencer Rattler, Mr. Discount Patrick Mahomes. Next up, we got Harold Fannin, tight end of the Cleveland Browns, going up against the Baltimore Ravens. 6% roster on Sleeper, 0.8 on ESPN, and 2% on Yahoo. Week 1 versus the Cincinnati Bengals, tight end 6 in PPR, tight end 9.5 PPR, 7 receptions on 9 targets for 63 yards. Like we talked about earlier on in the video, he led the Cleveland Browns in receptions. It wasn't Jerry Jeudy. It wasn't Cedric Tillman. It was Harold Fannin with 9. Now again, week 1 could pull the wool over the eyes, and I still do prefer David Njoku, even though David Njoku was outscored by Harold Fannin. 7 catches for 63 yards, whereas David Njoku had 3 catches for 37 yards on 6 targets. Again, it's week 1. Don't completely panic. Don't sell David Njoku for a half-eaten bag of potato chips and a used condom. But Harold Fannin is clearly going to be involved inside of this offense. And if the team does elect to trade David Njoku, which there was a lot of rumors circling about that in the offseason, then Harold Fannin has league winner written all over him. But it is also important to remember what happened with Isaiah Likely last year, where Isaiah Likely is the number 1 fucking waiver wire ad after week 1. Holy shit, look at Isaiah Likely. And then you picked up Isaiah Likely, and how did that go? Next up, we got Calvin Austin, wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So again, this is why you want to be very, very cautious with the players that you are picking up. So you're not just blowing all your fab on Harold Fannin because he had 9 fucking targets in week 1. Calvin Austin, Pittsburgh Steelers, going up against the Seattle Seahawks. 7% roster on Sleeper, 2.3 on ESPN, 2% on Yahoo. Week 1 at the New York Jumbo Jets. Wide receiver 16 in PPR, wide receiver 12 in half PPR. 4 receptions on 6 targets for 70 yards and a touchdown. For the snap share of the Steelers, 95% go to DK, 80% Calvin Austin, 18% Ben Skoranek and Roman Wilson, and 16% for Scotty Miller. So it's very clearly Metcalf, number 1. Calvin Austin, number 2. Now, I think Roman Wilson can develop into the number 2 wide receiver on this team. But as of right now, if Aaron Rodgers is able to stay in this fire, then Calvin Austin certainly should be rostered. Again, not a guy that you have to play, though, this week at all, even though I don't mind the matchup up against the Seahawks. At number 11, we got Trey Benson. Shout out to iCarly, running back of the Arizona Cardinals, going up against the Carolina Panthers. 54% roster on Sleeper, 51.4% on ESPN, and 39% on Yahoo. Week 1 at the New Orleans Saints, running back 27 in PPR, 26 in half PPR. 8 carries for 69 yards. Very nice. I like. 1 reception on 1 target for 6 yards. For the snap share, 65% Connor, 33% for Benson. James Conner outperformed him with 12 carries for 39 yards and 4 receptions on 4 targets for 5 yards and a touchdown. So Trey Benson is really just a handcuff. But I will say, if you are having a really bad week, it's a bye week for a couple of your running backs, and you have to throw someone out there, Trey Benson could have standalone value, especially in matchups where maybe the Arizona Cardinals are beating down on a defense. Final guy is going to be Mr. Discount Double Check, Ron Rodgers, the State Farm man himself, quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, going up against the Seahawks. 19% roster on Sleeper, 8.8 on ESPN, and 14% on Yahoo. Quarterback 7 last week at the Jets, 22 completions on 30 attempts for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns straight to the mouth of the Jets. The way he was talking about the Jets in the postgame got me fired up as a Jets hater. Aaron Rodgers whipping the blicky out up against the Jets was not really that shocking at all, even though I like the Jets defense just because of the revenge game narrative. This could be a crash and burn, though. This could be the classic week 1. Oh my God, Aaron Rodgers is back. Just like people were saying after the game last year, week 1. Oh my God, Aaron Rodgers is back. And then Aaron Rodgers is blowing metaphorical wee-wee for the rest of the season. So when you pick up Rodgers, don't just throw him out there to the dogs. Woof, woof. In week number 2, you picked him up, you leave him on your bench, you see what happens, and then maybe he develops into, as if Rodgers is developing, right? But he turns into this guy that you want to start on a more weekly basis. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below, like it owes you some money. Leave a like on today's video. It'd help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. Check out Underdog, promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Get your free pick. Get the play $5. Get $50 in bonus funds over on there if you play the pick'em. Love you long time. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. And as always, good boy.